My name is Alana, and for as long as I can remember, I've been drawn to healing. It wasn't just a choice I made one day, it felt like a calling, a pull deep within me that I couldn't ignore. Over the years, I dedicated my life to helping others find peace, balance, and well-being. My journey as a spiritual healer became not just my profession but my identity. I was the one people turned to when they needed comfort, when they couldn't find answers elsewhere. And for a long time, I believed I was fulfilling my purpose, bringing light into the lives of those who were suffering. As a child, I knew I was different. While other kids played without a care in the world, I was always attuned to something deeper, something unseen. I was sensitive to energy in a way that often made me feel out of place. I could walk into a room and feel the emotions lingering in the air, joy, sadness, anger. It was as if they were tangible things pressing against my skin. I didn't understand it then, but I always felt compelled to help. If someone was crying, I'd sit with them, even if I didn't know what to say. If someone was angry, I'd try to calm them. It wasn't just empathy, it was a need, a drive to ease their pain. But being so sensitive wasn't easy. I often felt overwhelmed, like the weight of others' emotions was too much to bear. Still, I couldn't turn it off, couldn't stop myself from trying to help. When I grew older, my curiosity about healing became a passion. I studied everything I could get my hands on: meditation, energy work, herbal remedies, ancient practices from cultures around the world. I was fascinated by the idea that the body, mind, and spirit were interconnected, and that true healing required addressing all three. I attended workshops, read countless books, and sought out mentors who could teach me everything they knew. Slowly, I began to develop my own practice, combining the techniques I had learned into something that felt uniquely mine. People began to seek me out, not just for advice, but for healing sessions that left them feeling lighter, renewed. It was fulfilling work, and I threw myself into it with everything I had. In my sessions, I used various techniques to channel energy and promote healing. I believed deeply in the interconnectedness of all things, that every person, every living being, was part of a greater whole. When I worked with someone, it wasn't just about addressing their pain or illness, it was about helping them reconnect with the flow of energy that surrounded and sustained them. I saw my role as a conduit, a bridge between the physical and the spiritual. This wasn't just a job to me, it was my calling, my purpose. And for a long time, I felt that I was exactly where I was meant to be. But then, something began to shift. At first, it was subtle, a feeling of weariness that I couldn't shake, no matter how much rest I got. I brushed it off, telling myself that it was just the demands of my work. But as time went on, the exhaustion deepened. It wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, emotional. I began to feel empty, even when I was helping others. The joy and fulfillment that had once driven me were fading, replaced by a gnawing sense of doubt. I started to wonder if I was truly helping people or if I was just giving them temporary relief, a bandage for wounds that needed something deeper to heal. It was a terrifying thought, that the work I had devoted my life to might be limited, that it might not be enough. The questions I had always pushed to the back of my mind began to surface with an intensity one couldn't ignore. Where did my powers come from? Was the energy I channeled truly healing, or was it something I didn't fully understand? I had always believed in the goodness of what I was doing, but now I wasn't so sure. I longed for answers, for something more profound, some true understanding of the forces I worked with. As I continued my practice, I felt a growing unease within me, a sense that something was missing. Then the dreams began. They were vivid, haunting visions of people in pain, faces twisted in agony, eyes filled with despair. In the dreams, I tried to help them, but my hands passed through them as if they were made of smoke. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, unable to shake the images from my mind. The dreams began to bleed into my waking life. I found it harder to focus, harder to stay present during my sessions. My thoughts felt scattered, my connection to the energy I worked with slipping away. I started to fear that I was losing control, not just of my practice, but of my own mind. The unease grew into something darker, something heavier. I felt as though I was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into a void. My connection to the source, to the energy that had always guided me, felt like it was unraveling. I was scared, not just for myself, but for the people who relied on me. What if I couldn't help them anymore? What if I was doing more harm than good? The very foundation of my life, the thing that had given me purpose and meaning, was crumbling beneath me. One session in particular stands out in my memory, a turning point I didn't fully understand at the time. A man came to me seeking relief from a chronic illness that had plagued him for years. As I worked with him, I felt an overwhelming drain of energy, unlike anything I had experienced before. It was as if something was pulling me into a vortex, a force I couldn't resist. My senses became disoriented, the room spinning around me. I tried to focus, to ground myself, but it was no use. I felt myself falling, slipping away. And then, suddenly, everything changed. I felt a strange lightness, as though I had left my body. The pain, the fear, the exhaustion, they were all gone. I looked down and saw myself lying still on the floor, my physical form motionless and pale. But I wasn't afraid. I felt detached, an observer watching from above. I realized that I was no longer bound to the physical world, that I was somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't explain but instinctively understood was beyond anything I had ever known. As I floated in this new state, I felt an irresistible pull, drawing me towards something indescribable. It wasn't a physical sensation but an energy, a presence that radiated love, compassion, and infinite power. I was being welcomed, embraced by this light that seemed to dissolve every fear, every doubt I had ever carried. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced, more profound, more real than the world I had left behind. The light grew stronger, and I felt myself moving toward it, unable to resist. It wasn't a tunnel in the physical sense, but a pathway of pure energy leading me closer to the source. As I traveled, all the weight I had carried, the doubts, the fears, the pain, vanished. It was as though I was being purified, made anew. At the end of this journey, I reached the source of the light, and there, waiting for me, was Jesus. He wasn't like the depictions I had seen in art or heard about in stories. He was a presence of pure love, radiating warmth and healing. He didn't speak in words, but I understood him completely, as though he was communicating directly with my soul. He knew everything about me, my questions, my struggles, my longing for answers. And yet, there was no judgment, only acceptance. I felt fully seen, fully known, and fully loved. Jesus conveyed truths that shook me to my core. You sought healing through energy, he said, but I am the source of all life. All healing comes from me. His words resonated with a power that left no room for doubt. I had spent my life searching for answers in practices and techniques, but here was the truth I had been longing for, the source I had unknowingly been reaching toward all along. He explained that this near-death experience was not a punishment but a gift, a chance for me to understand that true healing comes not from manipulation of energy but from grace, from love, from him. He showed me his life, his teachings, his miracles of healing, and his ultimate sacrifice on the cross. It was all done out of love, a love so profound that it encompassed every broken piece of humanity. He told me, I carried the burden of all pain and suffering so that you no longer have to. I am the healer of all souls. You are safe in my arms. Jesus revealed that the healing I had sought to bring to others was limited because it focused only on the physical or emotional. True healing, he said, was about the soul, a restoration that could only be achieved through him. He showed me heaven, a place of unimaginable joy and peace, where all suffering had ended. And then, he showed me hell, a place of separation from him, a place where the absence of his love was the ultimate agony. My path is not about control or manipulation, he said, but about compassion, understanding, and acceptance. I am here for all. He affirmed that the gift I had was real, but the power behind it was him, and that I had been unknowingly drawing from his grace all along. Your near-death experience, he said, is a calling, a chance for you to stop searching elsewhere for truth. I am waiting for you with open arms. Jesus invited me to surrender, to let go of my need to control, to trust him completely as the true source of healing, love, and salvation. He showed me how my purpose was not just to ease pain, but to guide people to His love, to point them toward their salvation. He promised that He would give me the strength and wisdom to carry out His will and that I would never be alone. As the light began to fade, I felt a profound sense of peace and readiness. I understood that my life was about to begin anew, with a purpose far greater than I had ever imagined. When I returned to my body, I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by the hum of machines and the concerned faces of doctors and nurses. My body was weak, but my spirit was stronger than ever. I knew I had been given a second chance, and I was determined to use it to share the truth I had discovered. From that day forward, everything changed. I could no longer look at my old practice the same way. I began to share my story with anyone who would listen, telling them about my encounter with Jesus and the truth He had revealed. Some were skeptical, others curious, but I knew that my job wasn't to convince, it was to share, to plant the seeds of His love and let Him do the rest. I spoke about how true healing comes not from energy or techniques, but from the grace of Jesus, from His love that conquers all. I shared the vision of heaven and the warning of hell, urging people to turn to Him, to surrender their lives and accept His gift of salvation. Not everyone understood, and many rejected my message, but I pressed on, knowing that this was my calling. I found a new spiritual family in the process, people who shared my faith and supported me as I navigated this new chapter of my life. Together, we worked to spread the message of Jesus' love and healing, to bring hope to those who were lost or hurting. My life was no longer about me, it was about Him, about serving His will and bringing His light into the world. Now, as I look back on everything I've experienced, I am filled with gratitude. My near-death experience was not the end, it was the beginning of a journey that I know will continue for the rest of my life. Jesus showed me the truth, and I will spend every moment I have left sharing it with others. His love is real, His grace is infinite, and His healing is available to all who are willing to receive it. This is my story, but more importantly, it is His story, written through me and through all who say yes to His call. As I continued on this new journey, I realized that the transformation within me was not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. Each day, I felt as though another layer of my old self was being peeled away, revealing something purer, something closer to the person Jesus had called me to be. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, times when I questioned whether I was strong enough to carry this message, whether I was worthy of the task entrusted to me. But in those moments of weakness, I felt His presence, His reassurance, reminding me that it wasn't about my strength, it was about His. I began to notice changes in how I approached people. In my old practice, I had always felt a certain pressure to fix things, to deliver some tangible result that would prove I was effective. Now, that pressure was gone. Instead of relying on my own abilities, I leaned into prayer, asking Jesus to work through me. I approached each interaction with a sense of humility, knowing that I was simply a vessel for His love and healing. And something miraculous happened. People began to respond in ways I had never seen before. It wasn't just about physical relief or emotional comfort, there was a deeper transformation taking place. I saw people's eyes light up with hope, their hearts open to the possibility of something greater than themselves. One of the most profound encounters I had was with a woman named Sarah. She had been battling severe depression for years and had tried everything, therapy, medication, alternative healing, but nothing seemed to help. When she came to me, she was at her wit's end, desperate for something, anything, that could bring her peace. In the past, I might have relied on energy work or meditation techniques, but this time, I felt a different prompting. I asked her if she would be willing to pray with me. She hesitated at first, unsure of what to expect, but eventually, she agreed. As we prayed together, I asked Jesus to reveal His love to Sarah, to show her that she was not alone, that she was deeply cherished, no matter what she was going through. Tears streamed down her face as she began to feel the weight of her burdens lift. For the first time in years, she said, she felt a glimmer of hope, a light breaking through the darkness. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. She began to open her heart to Jesus, to seek Him in prayer and scripture, and her depression started to lose its grip on her. It wasn't an overnight change, but it was real, and it was lasting. Stories like Sarah's became a regular part of my life. Each one was a testament to the power of His love, a reminder that true healing comes not from human effort but from surrendering to His grace. And yet, I knew that this path would not be without challenges. There were people who dismissed my experience, who accused me of abandoning my roots or spreading false hope. Some of my old clients expressed disappointment that I no longer practiced in the same way, and I struggled with the fear of losing their trust. But every time I felt discouraged, I returned to the words Jesus had spoken to me during my near-death experience: "Do not be afraid. My love will guide you." One of the hardest moments came when a former mentor of mine confronted me. She was someone I had admired deeply, someone who had taught me much of what I knew about energy healing. When she heard about my new faith and the changes in my practice, she sought me out to challenge me. "Alana," she said, "I don't understand what's happened to you. You were one of the most gifted healers I've ever known. How can you turn your back on everything we've worked for?" Her words cut deep, and for a moment, I felt a pang of doubt. But then, I remembered the peace I had found in Jesus, the truth He had revealed to me. I took a deep breath and responded as calmly as I could. "I haven't turned my back on healing," I said. "I've found its true source. Everything I was searching for, everything I thought I was doing on my own, it was Him all along. I didn't see it at the time, but now I know. And I can't go back to the way things were, not when I've experienced His love." She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and disbelief. "I hope you're right," she said quietly. "I hope it's worth it." Her response stayed with me, a reminder that not everyone would understand or accept the path I had chosen. But I also knew that my calling wasn't to convince everyone, it was to remain faithful, to share the truth as I had experienced it, and to trust that Jesus would do the rest. As time went on, I felt a growing desire to reach more people, to share my story on a larger scale. I began speaking at churches, community centers, and gatherings of people who were searching for hope and healing. Each time, I shared not just the details of my near-death experience, but the transformation it had sparked in me. I spoke about the love of Jesus, about His power to heal not just the body but the soul, and about the peace that comes from surrendering to Him. I was often met with tears, with people coming forward to share their own struggles and questions. It was humbling to see how God was using my story to touch lives in ways I could never have imagined. One evening, after speaking at a small church in a rural town, a young man approached me. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting as he tried to find the words to speak. Finally, he said, "I don't know if I believe in Jesus, but what you said tonight, it felt real. Like there's something I've been missing my whole life. How do I start? How do I find Him?" His question brought tears to my eyes, and I told him the simplest truth I knew: just talk to Him. You don't need fancy words or rituals. Just open your heart and tell Him what you're feeling. He's already listening. Moments like that reminded me why I had been given a second chance, why I had been shown the truth in such a profound way. It wasn't just for me, it was for anyone who was searching, anyone who was lost or hurting and didn't know where to turn. My role wasn't to provide all the answers, but to point people to the one who could. As I write this now, I am filled with gratitude for the journey I have been on. It hasn't been easy, and there are still days when I feel the weight of the mission I've been given. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. The peace I've found in Jesus, the joy of seeing His love transform lives, it's more than I ever could have hoped for. My life is no longer about my own plans or ambitions. It's about Him, about walking in obedience to His call and trusting Him to lead the way. To anyone reading this, I want you to know that the love of Jesus is real. It's not something you have to earn or deserve, it's a gift, freely given. All you have to do is open your heart and receive it. If you're searching for healing, for peace, for something more, I invite you to turn to Him. He is waiting for you, just as He was waiting for me. And His arms are always open. As I continued sharing my story, the ripple effect of the message began to grow. People from different walks of life, many of whom I never thought would be open to hearing about Jesus, began reaching out. They were curious, some skeptical, but most of all, searching. They wanted to know if the peace I spoke about, the transformation I had experienced, could be real for them too. And every time someone asked me if it was possible, my answer was an unwavering yes. Because I wasn't offering them my story or my strength, I was offering them the truth of His love, something far greater than anything I could ever give on my own. One night, I received an email that left me sitting in silence for several minutes. It was from a woman named Rachel, who described herself as a lifelong atheist. She had heard me speak at an event, though she admitted she had only attended because a friend had insisted. In her email, Rachel wrote, "I don't know if I believe in God, much less Jesus. But when you talked about His love, it stirred something in me that I can't explain. I've spent my whole life believing that we're all just here by chance, that there's no greater purpose or meaning. But now I'm not so sure. I want to understand what you found. I want to know if it's real." I read her words over and over, feeling the weight of her vulnerability, her courage to reach out. I prayed before responding, asking Jesus to guide my words. When I finally replied, I told her what had become the foundation of my message. Jesus doesn't ask for perfect faith or complete understanding. He only asks for an open heart. If you're willing to take even the smallest step toward Him, He will meet you where you are. You don't have to have all the answers, just be honest with Him and let Him show you His love. Rachel and I continued exchanging emails over the weeks that followed. She asked questions, sometimes challenging ones, and I did my best to answer them with honesty and humility. I shared scripture with her, passages that had brought me comfort and clarity during my own journey. And slowly, I began to see a change in her tone. The skepticism softened, replaced by a quiet yearning. One day, she wrote, "I prayed last night for the first time in my life. I didn't know what to say, so I just asked Jesus to help me believe. And for the first time, I felt something. I don't know what it was, but it felt like a light breaking through the darkness." Her words brought tears to my eyes. I knew that moment wasn't about anything I had done, it was the work of the Holy Spirit, gently drawing her closer. Rachel's journey was her own, and I was simply grateful to witness it. Months later, she told me that she had given her life to Jesus, that she had finally found the peace and purpose she had been searching for. Stories like Rachel's reminded me why I had been given this calling, why I had been shown the truth in such an extraordinary way. But not every encounter was so heartwarming. There were times when I faced rejection, hostility, and even ridicule. Some people accused me of being naive, of trading one form of illusion for another. Others dismissed my experience as a hallucination or a figment of my imagination. At first, those reactions stung. I wanted so badly for everyone to see what I had seen, to know the love I had come to know. But over time, I learned to let go of the need for validation. My role wasn't to convince or argue, it was simply to share the truth and trust that Jesus would work in their hearts in His own time. One particularly difficult moment came when a close friend from my past confronted me. She had known me during the years when I was deeply immersed in energy healing, and she couldn't understand the transformation I had undergone. "Alana," she said, "you've always been so open-minded, so accepting of all paths. How can you suddenly claim that Jesus is the only way? It feels like you've turned your back on everything we believed in." Her words hit me hard, not because I doubted my faith, but because I cared about her and didn't want her to feel betrayed. I took a deep breath and tried to explain as gently as I could. "I haven't turned my back on anything," I said. "I've simply found the truth I was always searching for. Everything I believed in before, it was pointing me toward Him, even if I didn't realize it at the time. This isn't about rejecting the past, it's about embracing the fullness of what I've found." She listened, but didn't seem convinced. "I just don't understand how you can be so certain," she said. "What if you're wrong?" I smiled, not out of condescension, but out of the peace I felt in my heart. "I understand why it's hard to believe," I said. "But I can't deny what I've experienced. Jesus isn't just an idea or a concept to me, He's real. He met me in the darkest moment of my life, and He's been with me every step of the way since. I don't expect you to understand all of it right now, but I hope you'll keep your heart open. Because He's waiting for you, just like he was waiting for me. The conversation ended on an uncertain note, and for days afterward, I prayed for her, asking Jesus to soften her heart. I didn't know if she would ever come to believe, but I trusted that the seed had been planted. And that was enough. As the years went on, my journey deepened in ways I never could have anticipated. I began to see how Jesus was not just transforming my life, but using it to reach others in ways I couldn't have planned. Opportunities arose that I never would have sought out on my own: speaking engagements, interviews, even invitations to share my story on a broader platform. Each time, I felt the weight of the responsibility, the awareness that this wasn't about me but about him. And each time, I felt his strength carrying me, his words flowing through me. One of the most profound moments came during a trip overseas. I had been invited to speak at a conference on faith and healing, and though I was excited, I also felt a sense of inadequacy. The audience would include people from many different backgrounds, some of whom were deeply skeptical of anything related to faith. I prayed fervently in the days leading up to the event, asking Jesus to guide me, to give me the words that would touch their hearts. When the day came, I stood before the crowd, my heart pounding but my spirit at peace. I began by sharing my story, recounting the near-death experience that had changed everything. I spoke about the love of Jesus, about how it had filled the emptiness I hadn't even realized was there. I talked about the peace that comes from surrendering to him, the healing that goes beyond the physical and reaches the soul. As I spoke, I could see the expressions on people's faces shifting, some skeptical, some curious, some deeply moved. When I finished, there was a moment of silence before the applause began. And then, one by one, people started coming forward to share their own stories, their own questions and struggles. Some asked for prayer, others simply wanted to talk. It was a humbling experience, a reminder that the message of Jesus' love transcends all boundaries, cultural, spiritual, and personal. Looking back, I see how every step of my journey, even the painful and confusing ones, was preparing me for this calling. The doubts I had faced, the mistakes I had made, the questions that had haunted me, they were all part of the process, shaping me into someone who could speak to others with authenticity and compassion. I'm not perfect, and I never will be. But I don't have to be, because it's not about me. It's about him. To this day, I continue to share the truth I discovered, the truth that changed my life. And my message remains the same: you are loved. Deeply, unconditionally, and eternally loved by a Savior who knows you, who sees you, and who longs to bring you into his arms. If you're searching, if you're hurting, if you're longing for something more, turn to him. He's already waiting for you. And his love will never fail. Each new day brought an opportunity to witness how the love of Jesus could transform lives, not just mine but the lives of those I encountered. The more I shared my journey, the more I realized that people weren't just craving healing for their bodies or answers for their minds, they were searching for something deeper, something eternal. And in every conversation, every prayer, every testimony, I could feel his presence guiding me, reminding me that I was a part of something far greater than myself. One particularly unforgettable moment happened during an outreach event in a small town. The church that had invited me was modest, with cracked wooden pews and faded walls, but it was filled with people hungry for hope. Among them was a young boy, no older than 10, who had been brought by his grandmother. His name was Ethan, and he was battling a rare illness that left him weak and often in pain. His grandmother told me he rarely smiled anymore, but something about the way he looked at me that day, his wide, searching eyes, left an impression on my heart. After the service, his grandmother brought him up to me. She held his hand tightly as she spoke, her voice trembling. "Ethan wanted to meet you," she said. "He says he feels something when you talk, like a warmth in his heart. I don't know what it is, but maybe you could pray for him." I knelt down to Ethan's level, looking into his tired eyes. "Hi, Ethan," I said softly. "Would you like me to pray with you?" He nodded, his small hands gripping mine. As I prayed, I asked Jesus to wrap Ethan in his love, to bring peace to his heart and strength to his body. I didn't ask for a miracle in the way some might expect. I knew that healing comes in many forms, some of which we may not fully understand, but I prayed for Ethan to feel the presence of Jesus, to know that he was not alone. When I opened my eyes, Ethan was smiling, a small, radiant smile that lit up his face. It wasn't that his illness had disappeared in that instant, but something in him had shifted. He later told his grandmother, "I felt like someone was hugging me, but I couldn't see them. It felt safe." That moment stayed with me, a reminder that sometimes the most profound healings are the ones we can't measure or explain. Ethan's story spread through the town, and soon more people were coming to the church, not looking for me, but looking for the source of the peace and love I had spoken about. It wasn't about me, it was about him. And that truth humbled me every single day. Still, my journey wasn't without its struggles. There were moments when I felt the weight of the calling pressing down on me, moments when I questioned whether I was equipped for the task. The enemy often tried to plant seeds of doubt in my mind, whispering that I wasn't enough, that my past mistakes disqualified me. But every time those thoughts crept in, I turned to Jesus. I remembered his words during my near-death experience, his promise that I would never walk this path alone. And in those moments of prayer, I felt his strength fill me, reminding me that it was never about my worthiness, it was about his grace. One of the greatest challenges came when I was invited to speak at a conference that focused on alternative healing practices. It was a world I had once been deeply immersed in, and part of me hesitated. I knew many of the attendees would be skeptical, even hostile, toward my message. But I also knew that they were the very people I had been called to reach. After all, I had once been in their shoes, searching for answers, for purpose, for something greater than myself. I prayed for courage and clarity, trusting that Jesus would give me the words I needed. When I stood before the room, I could feel the tension in the air. Some of the attendees looked at me with curiosity, others with skepticism, and a few with outright disdain. I began by acknowledging my own journey, sharing how I had once relied on the same practices they embraced. I told them about the exhaustion I had felt, the emptiness that had grown despite my best efforts. And then I shared the turning point, the moment I encountered Jesus, the moment everything changed. I could see their expressions shift as I spoke. Some softened, others grew more guarded, but I pressed on, not with arguments or debates, but with the simple truth of my experience. "I know what it's like to search," I said. "I know what it's like to feel that there's something just out of reach, something that will finally bring the peace and healing you've been longing for. And I'm here to tell you that what you're searching for isn't something, it's someone. His name is Jesus, and he's closer than you think." By the end of the session, a few people approached me, their eyes filled with questions. One woman, who introduced herself as Maya, said, "I've never believed in Jesus, but I can't deny that there's something in your story that feels real. How do I start? How do I find him?" Her question mirrored the one I had heard so many times before, and my answer was the same: just talk to him. You don't need perfect words, and you don't need to have it all figured out. Just open your heart and let him in. He's already waiting for you. Maya's journey was her own, and I knew that I might never see the fruits of that conversation. But I trusted that the seed had been planted, and that Jesus would water it in his time. That's the beauty of this calling. It's not about results or recognition. It's about obedience, about showing up and trusting him to do the rest. As I continued to grow in my faith, I began to see how Jesus was not only transforming me, but also using my past to reach others. The years I had spent in alternative healing practices, the mistakes I had made, the doubts I had struggled with, they were all part of the story he was writing through me. It was a reminder that nothing is wasted in his hands. He takes our brokenness, our failures, and even our pain, and he turns them into something beautiful, something that can point others toward his love. Today, as I sit and reflect on everything that has happened, I am overwhelmed by gratitude. My near-death experience was not an end, it was a beginning, a doorway to a life I never could have imagined. It wasn't just about finding peace or purpose, it was about finding him, the source of all life, all love, and all healing. And now, every day is a chance to share the truth, to be a small part of the incredible work he is doing in the world. To anyone who is reading this, I want you to know that this story isn't just mine, it's yours too. The love of Jesus is for you, wherever you are, whatever you've been through. You don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to be perfect. All you have to do is say yes to Him, to open your heart and let Him in. He's waiting for you, with arms wide open and a love that will never let you go. And if you take that step, I promise, your life will never be the same. The journey of faith is not one of perfection, it's one of surrender and trust. As I continued to walk this path, I learned that following Jesus didn't mean my life would be free of challenges or struggles. Far from it. There were days when the weight of my calling felt heavy, moments when I felt unworthy, and times when I faced rejection from people I cared about. But through it all, I found strength in His promises. Jesus never said life would be easy, but He promised that He would never leave us, and that assurance carried me through even the hardest days. One of the most difficult lessons I had to learn was how to trust Him completely, even when I didn't understand His plan. There was a family I met during one of my speaking events, a mother, a father, and their young daughter, Lily, who was battling a terminal illness. The pain in their eyes was almost unbearable to witness, but there was also a spark of hope, a fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, things could change. They asked me to pray for Lily, and I did, pouring my heart out to Jesus and asking for His healing touch. I believed with every fiber of my being that He could heal her. And yet, weeks later, I received the heartbreaking news that Lily had passed away. I wrestled with God in the aftermath of her death, struggling to reconcile my faith in His goodness with the pain of such a loss. Why hadn't He healed her? Why had He allowed her family to endure such suffering? The questions weighed heavily on my heart, and for a time, I felt as though I had failed, not just Lily and her family, but Jesus Himself. But as I prayed and sought His guidance, I began to understand something profound. Healing doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes, the ultimate healing is not of the body but of the soul. Lily's family later told me that in her final days, she spoke of feeling peaceful, unafraid, and surrounded by love. She told us she saw Jesus, her mother said through tears. She said He was holding her hand and telling her she was going home. That moment reminded me that Jesus sees the bigger picture, one that we can't always comprehend. While we live in a world filled with pain and loss, He promises a future where every tear will be wiped away and every broken heart will be mended. Lily's story wasn't an end, it was a beginning, an entry into the fullness of His presence. And her family, though grieving, found comfort in that truth. Their faith inspired me to trust Him even when I didn't have all the answers, to believe that His plans are always good, even when they don't align with my expectations. As my ministry continued to grow, I encountered countless stories like Lily's, stories of heartbreak and hope, of doubt and faith, of people grappling with the mysteries of life and death. Each one reminded me of the importance of pointing people not to myself, but to Jesus. I was just a messenger, a flawed and imperfect vessel for His love. It wasn't my job to have all the answers or to fix every problem. My role was simply to show up, to share the truth of His grace, and to trust Him to do the rest. One of the most humbling experiences came when I was invited to speak at a prison. The chaplain who organized the event told me that many of the inmates were hardened skeptics, men and women who had lived through unimaginable pain and made choices that had cost them everything. They've heard it all before, he warned me. But maybe your story will reach them in a way others haven't. I prayed fervently in the days leading up to the event, asking Jesus to prepare their hearts and to give me the words they needed to hear. When I arrived at the prison, I was struck by the heaviness of the atmosphere, the cold, sterile walls, the distant clang of metal doors, the guarded expressions of the inmates as they filed into the room. As I began to speak, I could feel their skepticism, their resistance. They had built walls around their hearts, walls fortified by years of pain, regret, and disillusionment. But I didn't try to break through those walls with clever arguments or persuasive rhetoric. Instead, I shared my story, my doubts, my struggles, my encounter with Jesus that had changed everything. I spoke about His love, a love that doesn't depend on what we've done or who we've been, a love that meets us exactly where we are. There's nothing you've done, I said, that can separate you from His love. Nothing. He's not waiting for you to clean yourself up or fix all your mistakes. He's just waiting for you to say yes. At first, their expressions didn't change, and I wondered if my words were making any impact. But then, near the end of my talk, a man in the back raised his hand. His voice was rough, his demeanor guarded, but his question was raw and honest. How can you be so sure if he loves me? After everything I've done? I walked closer to him, meeting his gaze. Because he loved me, I said. And I didn't deserve it either. None of us do. That's what makes his love so incredible. It's not about earning it. It's a gift, freely given. All you have to do is accept it. The room fell silent, and I could see the tears welling up in his eyes. It was a moment I'll never forget, a reminder that no heart is too hard, no past too broken, for Jesus to redeem. By the end of the session, several inmates had come forward, asking for prayer, for guidance, for help in taking their first steps toward him. It wasn't about me or my words, it was about his spirit moving in that place, breaking down barriers and bringing light into the darkest corners. Through experiences like these, I've come to understand that the love of Jesus is not confined by circumstances or boundaries. It reaches into prisons, into hospital rooms, into homes filled with strife and hearts filled with doubt. It's a love that pursues, that heals, that restores. And every time I see it in action, I'm reminded of the incredible privilege it is to be a part of His work. As I close this chapter of my story, I want to leave you with this: wherever you are, whatever you're facing, know that you are not alone. The same Jesus who met me in my darkest hour, who showed me the depth of His love and the power of His grace, is waiting for you. He sees you, He knows you, and He loves you more than you can imagine. You don't have to have all the answers or fix all your problems before coming to Him. Just take that first step and let Him do the rest. His arms are open, His love is unending, and His grace is sufficient for you. Always. Even as I write these words, I feel the overwhelming presence of His love, a love that continually draws me closer, even when I stumble, even when I feel inadequate. The journey I've been on hasn't ended. In many ways, it feels like it's just beginning. Every day brings new encounters, new opportunities to share His truth, and new reminders of how boundless His grace truly is. Over time, I began to see how God was weaving my story into a much larger tapestry, one that connected countless lives in ways I couldn't have imagined. Each conversation, each prayer, each moment of vulnerability became a thread in that tapestry, and I realized that my role wasn't to complete the picture but to simply contribute my part. It was humbling to know that He could take someone as imperfect as me and use me to reflect His light. One of the most profound lessons I've learned is that His love is not transactional. It's not something we earn or deserve. It's a gift, freely given, and it's available to everyone, no matter where they've been or what they've done. This truth became especially clear to me during an encounter with a woman named Julia. Julia came to one of my events reluctantly, dragged along by a friend who insisted she needed to hear my story. From the moment I met her, I could sense the walls she had built around her heart. Her arms were crossed, her expression skeptical, and her body language screamed, "Prove it." After the event, she approached me, not with questions, but with accusations. "You talk about Jesus like He's some kind of fix-all solution," she said, her voice sharp. "But where was He when my life fell apart? Where was He when I lost everything?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with pain. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I silently prayed for wisdom, for the right words to reach her heart. Finally, I said, "Julia, I don't have all the answers. I don't know why certain things happen or why we face the pain we do. But I do know this: Jesus was there, even in the darkest moments. He wasn't the one who caused your pain, but He's the one who's been holding you through it, even if you didn't realize it." Her eyes filled with tears, though her expression remained guarded. "So why didn't He stop it?" she whispered. "If He's so loving, why didn't He stop it?" I nodded, understanding the weight of her question. "I've asked that same question more times than I can count," I admitted. "And what I've come to realize is that while He doesn't always stop the storms, He always walks with us through them. He takes our pain, our brokenness, and He redeems it in ways we can't always see in the moment. But He never leaves us. Not for a second. Julia didn't respond right away, but something in her demeanor softened. She didn't say much else that night, but weeks later, I received an email from her. She wrote, "I've been angry at God for so long that I didn't even realize I was shutting Him out. After we talked, I decided to try something I hadn't done in years. I prayed. At first, it felt awkward and pointless, but then I felt something, a warmth, a peace I can't explain. I think I'm ready to let Him in." Her message was a reminder that sometimes, all we're called to do is plant a seed. It's not our job to force it to grow, that's His work. But when we step out in faith, when we share His love with authenticity and humility, He can take even the smallest seed and turn it into something beautiful. As the years passed, I began to see how Jesus was using not just my story, but the stories of those I encountered to create a ripple effect. People who had come to faith through my testimony were now sharing their own stories, reaching others in ways I never could. It was a powerful reminder that His love is contagious, it spreads, it multiplies, and it transforms. One of the most unexpected blessings of this journey has been the community that has formed around it. People from all walks of life, young and old, rich and poor, believers and skeptics, have come together, united by a shared longing for truth and connection. It's a reflection of His kingdom, a glimpse of the unity and love we're called to embody. And in that community, I've found not just support, but a deeper understanding of what it means to live out my faith. There have been moments of overwhelming joy, like seeing someone take their first steps toward Jesus or witnessing a family reconciled after years of division. There have also been moments of deep sorrow, like walking alongside someone through loss or watching a friend wrestle with doubt. But through it all, I've learned that His grace is sufficient, that His strength is made perfect in our weakness. One of the most profound experiences came during a mission trip to a country where Christianity was not widely accepted. The risks were real, and there were moments when I felt fear creeping in, but I knew I was where He wanted me to be. The people I met there were hungry for hope, for something that could fill the void they had been trying to fill with everything else. And despite the cultural and language barriers, the message of His love transcended all of it. One night, after sharing my testimony with a small group, a young man named Amir approached me. He had tears streaming down his face as he said, "I've been searching for something my whole life. I've tried everything, wealth, success, relationships, but nothing has filled the emptiness inside me. When you talked about Jesus, it felt like you were describing exactly what I've been missing." We prayed together that night, and Amir gave his life to Jesus. His transformation was immediate and profound. He later told me, "For the first time, I feel free. I feel like I've finally found the thing I was created for." Amir's story is just one of countless examples of how Jesus is moving in hearts all over the world. It's a reminder that His love knows no boundaries, no limitations. It reaches into every corner, every circumstance, and it changes everything. As I continue this journey, I've come to understand that my role is not to have all the answers or to fix every problem. My role is to point people to Him, to share the truth of His love and grace, and to trust Him to do the rest. It's a humbling and awe-inspiring privilege, one that I don't take lightly. To anyone who is reading these words, know this: your story matters. Your pain, your questions, your struggles, they all matter to Him. You are not alone, and you are not forgotten. Jesus is reaching out to you, just as He reached out to me. All you have to do is take that first step, to open your heart and let Him in. His love is waiting for you, and it's a love that will never fail, never leave, and never let you go. And when you say yes to Him, you'll find that your life, no matter how broken or incomplete it may feel, is part of a greater story, a story of redemption, of grace, and of unending love. As the years unfolded, I began to see the threads of my life being woven into a much larger story, a story of hope, redemption, and the boundless love of Jesus. Every new encounter, every conversation, every prayer became another opportunity to witness His transformative power, not just in my life, but in the lives of others. Each moment felt like a reminder of his faithfulness, his presence, and his unwavering desire to draw all people closer to him. But even as I shared my story and saw lives change, I remained acutely aware of my own humanity. There were days when doubt crept in, when the weight of the calling felt overwhelming, and when I questioned whether I was truly equipped to carry this message. In those moments, I found myself returning to the quiet place of prayer, laying my fears and insecurities at his feet. And without fail, he met me there, reminding me that it was never about my strength or my abilities, it was about his. One such moment came during a particularly challenging season. I had been traveling extensively, speaking at events and meeting with people who were searching for answers, and I began to feel the toll it was taking on me. Physically, I was exhausted. Emotionally, I felt drained. I started to wonder if I was making a difference, if the seeds I was planting were truly taking root. The enemy's whispers of inadequacy grew louder, and I found myself questioning whether I was enough. In the midst of that struggle, I received a letter. It was from a woman named Elena, who had attended one of my talks months earlier. Her words stopped me in my tracks. When I heard you speak, I was at the lowest point in my life. I had lost all hope and was ready to give up. But something you said, that Jesus loves us not for what we've done, but simply because we're His, stayed with me. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, that love was real. I started praying, even though I didn't know how, and little by little, I felt His presence. It's changed everything. Thank you for being bold enough to share your story. It saved my life. I sat with that letter for a long time, tears streaming down my face. It was a reminder that the work I was doing wasn't about immediate results or visible outcomes, it was about obedience. It was about trusting that Jesus was working behind the scenes in ways I couldn't see, touching hearts and changing lives in His perfect timing. Elena's letter reignited the fire in my soul, reminding me why I had been called to this path in the first place. As I continued forward, I began to notice how Jesus was using the very things I had once considered weaknesses, my doubts, my past failures, my moments of brokenness, to reach others. People often told me that my vulnerability, my willingness to admit that I didn't have all the answers, made them feel less alone. It reminded them that faith isn't about perfection, it's about surrender. And in that surrender, we find the strength, the peace, and the purpose we've been searching for. One of the most profound lessons I've learned on this journey is that love is the cornerstone of everything Jesus calls us to do. It's not about eloquent speeches or grand gestures, it's about meeting people where they are, listening to their stories, and showing them the same grace and compassion that He has shown us. I've found that some of the most meaningful moments of ministry happen not on stages or in front of crowds, but in quiet, one-on-one conversations. It's in those intimate moments, when someone feels truly seen and heard, that the love of Jesus shines the brightest. I'll never forget a young man named Marcus. He approached me after an event, his hands trembling as he spoke. "I don't know if I belong here," he said. "I've done things I'm not proud of. I've hurt people. I've hurt myself. How could God ever forgive someone like me?" His words broke my heart because I could see the weight he was carrying, the shame that had wrapped itself around his soul. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Marcus, the beauty of Jesus' love is that it's not about what you've done, it's about what He's done for you. On the cross, He took all of that shame, all of that pain, and He nailed it there so you wouldn't have to carry it anymore. You're not defined by your past. You're defined by His love." We prayed together that night, and I watched as the walls he had built around his heart began to crumble. He later told me that it was the first time in years that he had felt hope, the first time he had truly believed that he could be forgiven. Marcus' journey was just beginning, but I knew that Jesus had already started a work in him that would continue to unfold in beautiful ways. Through stories like Marcus, I've come to understand that the message of Jesus is simple yet profound: you are loved, you are forgiven, and you are not alone. It's a message the world desperately needs, and it's one that I am committed to sharing for as long as I have breath in my lungs. There have been times when I've felt the weight of the work, moments when I've wondered if I'm doing enough or if I'm saying the right things. But in those moments, I remind myself that it's not about me, it's about Him. My job is not to save anyone, only Jesus can do that. My job is simply to be faithful, to show up, and to share the truth of His love. And every time I've done that, He has shown up in ways that leave me in awe. As I look to the future, I feel a deep sense of peace and purpose. I don't know where this journey will take me, but I know who is leading me, and that is enough. I know there will be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and difficulty, but I also know that His grace will sustain me. The same Jesus who met me in my darkest moment is with me now, and He will be with me every step of the way. To anyone who is reading this, I want you to know that this story isn't just mine, it's yours too. No matter where you are or what you've been through, His love is for you. It's a love that sees you, knows you, and accepts you exactly as you are. You don't have to have it all together, and you don't have to have all the answers. All you have to do is take that first step, to open your heart and say yes to Him. When you do, you'll find a love that is deeper, stronger, and more transformative than anything you could ever imagine. And so, my journey continues, not as a perfect person, but as someone who has been forever changed by the love of Jesus. My prayer is that through my story, through the words I've shared, you'll catch a glimpse of that love and that it will spark something in your heart. Because His love is for you. It always has been, and it always will be. And when you say yes to Him, you'll find that your story is part of something so much greater, a story of hope, redemption, and the unending grace of the One who gave everything to call you His own. As my journey with Jesus unfolded, I began to notice how His work in my life wasn't just about transforming me, it was about using me to reach others. I found myself in places I never thought I'd go, speaking to people I never thought I'd meet, and sharing His truth in ways I never could have imagined. Yet through it all, one thing remained constant: His faithfulness. Every step, every conversation, every prayer was a reminder that He was orchestrating something far bigger than I could comprehend. One of the most poignant lessons I've learned is that Jesus meets us in the ordinary, in the small and quiet moments of life. It's easy to think that ministry happens on stages or at large gatherings, but some of the most powerful encounters I've had have been in unexpected places, at a coffee shop, during a walk in the park, or even in a grocery store aisle. These moments have shown me that His love isn't confined to a specific setting, it permeates every corner of our lives. I remember one such moment vividly. I was sitting in an airport, waiting for a delayed flight, when a woman sat down next to me. She looked weary, her shoulders slumped as though she were carrying the weight of the world. I felt a nudge in my spirit, a quiet prompting to talk to her. At first, I hesitated. What would I say? What if she didn't want to talk? But the nudge persisted, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. I turned to her and simply said, "You look like you've had a long day. Are you okay?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she began to share her story. She was traveling to see her estranged daughter, hoping to reconcile after years of hurt and conflict. "I don't even know if she'll want to see me," she admitted. "I don't know if she'll ever forgive me." As I listened, I felt the Holy Spirit guiding me, giving me the words to speak. I told her about Jesus, about His love and His power to heal even the deepest wounds. I shared how He had restored relationships in my own life, how He had taught me that forgiveness is not about condoning the past, but about freeing ourselves to move forward. By the time our flight was boarding, she was smiling through her tears. "Thank you," she said. "I feel like I have hope for the first time in years." That encounter reminded me that ministry isn't about having the perfect plan or the right setting, it's about being available. It's about listening to His voice and stepping out in faith, even when it feels uncomfortable or inconvenient. And time again, I've seen how He can take the smallest acts of obedience and use them to change lives. Another lesson I've learned is the importance of vulnerability. For so much of my life, I tried to project an image of strength and competence, thinking that's what people needed from me. But the more I've shared my struggles, my doubts, and my failures, the more I've seen how God uses those moments to reach others. People don't need perfection, they need authenticity. They need to know that it's okay to be broken, that it's okay to have questions, and that Jesus meets us right where we are. One of the most poignant examples of this came during a women's retreat where I was invited to speak. I had planned a carefully crafted message, filled with scripture and personal stories, but as I stood in front of the group, I felt Jesus prompting me to share something I hadn't planned. It was a story from my past, one of pain and regret, a chapter one had rarely spoken about publicly. For a moment, I hesitated. What if they judged me? What if it made them see me differently? But I knew I had to obey. As I told my story, I could feel the weight in the room shift. Women began to weep, and after I finished, one by one, they came forward to share their own stories of pain and redemption. I thought I was the only one woman said through tears. I didn't think anyone else could understand what I've been through. It was a powerful reminder that our greatest struggles often become the very things God uses to bring healing to others. Through all of these experiences, I've come to see that the heart of ministry is love. Not the kind of love that's fleeting or conditional, but the deep, transformative love of Jesus. It's a love that sees beyond our flaws and failures, a love that calls us to step out of our comfort zones and into the lives of others. It's a love that breaks down walls, heals wounds, and restores what was once lost. And it's a love that has changed me in ways I never thought possible. As I look back on everything that has brought me to this point, I'm overwhelmed by gratitude. Gratitude for the second chance I was given, for the people who have walked this journey with me, and for the countless ways Jesus has shown himself faithful. But most of all, I'm grateful for his love, a love that pursued me when I was lost, a love that has sustained me through every trial, and a love that continues to draw me closer to him every day. To those who are reading this, I want to leave you with one final thought. Your story is not over. No matter where you are or what you've been through, Jesus is writing a story in your life that is more beautiful and more redemptive than you could ever imagine. He sees you, he knows you, and he loves you with a love that will never fail. All he asks is that you take the first step, to open your heart and say yes to him. And when you do, you'll find that his love is not just something you read about or hear about, it's something you experience. It's a love that transforms, that heals, and that gives life in abundance. This is not the end of my story. It's simply another chapter in a journey that I know will continue to unfold in ways I can't yet see. And as I move forward, my prayer is that I will remain faithful to the calling he has placed on my life, to share his love and his truth with everyone I meet. Because at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about him. And there is nothing greater, nothing more fulfilling, than living for the one who gave everything to call us his own. As I reflect on everything that has unfolded, I realize that this journey has been one of constant surrender, renewal, and hope. My story, while deeply personal, is not mine alone. It is a story of how Jesus works in the lives of those who are willing to open their hearts to him. It is a story of how he takes brokenness and turns it into beauty, how he takes despair and gives it purpose, and how he takes the lost and leads them home. There came a moment, not long ago, when I found myself sitting quietly by the ocean. The waves crashed against the shore, steady and unrelenting, and I thought about how they mirrored the constancy of his love. No matter how far I had drifted, no matter how many times I had stumbled, his love had always been there, pursuing me, calling me back to him. As I sat there, I prayed a simple prayer: Jesus, thank you. Thank you for saving me, for redeeming me, for using me despite my flaws. Thank you for showing me that your love is greater than anything I could ever comprehend. I give you everything, my past, my present, and my future. Use me however you see fit. Let my life point others to you. That prayer wasn't the end of my journey, but it felt like a moment of culmination, a moment when I fully understood that my life is not my own. It belongs to him, the one who gave his life so that I could truly live. And in that surrender, I found a peace that can only come from knowing that I am exactly where I am meant to be, doing exactly what I was created to do. Since then, I have continued to share his message, not out of obligation but out of an overflowing gratitude for all he has done. I've encountered people from all walks of life, some joyful, some broken, some skeptical, some searching, and each interaction has reminded me of the depth of his love. It doesn't matter where we come from, what we've done, or how far we've fallen, his love is for everyone. And that truth is what drives me forward, even on the hardest days. The story of my life is not extraordinary because of anything I've done. It's extraordinary because of what He has done. He took a woman who was lost, confused, and searching for meaning, and He gave her a new identity, a new purpose, and a new hope. And He can do the same for anyone who is willing to say yes to Him. As I bring this chapter to a close, I want to leave you with one final thought. Jesus is the answer to the questions your heart has been asking. He is the peace you've been longing for, the love you've been searching for, and the purpose you've been trying to find. He is the only one who can fill the emptiness inside of us and make us whole. And He is waiting for you, just as He waited for me. If you take nothing else from my story, take this: you are loved. Completely, unconditionally, and eternally loved by the one who created you. He knows you, He sees you, and He wants to walk with you through every moment of your life. You don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to let Him in. As I move forward, I know that my story will continue to unfold, shaped by His hands and guided by His love. But for now, I rest in the knowledge that I am His, and He is mine. And that, more than anything, is enough.